Welcome back to Journey at Home. If it is your first time tuning in, we hope it won't be your last. We create content that makes it simple for you to follow Jesus. So click that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you're notified when we roll out new content. And let's jump into today. This is the final episode in our series, You're Not the Boss of Me, where we've been learning how to say no to the emotions that compete for our control. Because all of us have emotions that compete for control of our mind, our mouth, and our mood, don't we? And Jesus said we better get control of all that stuff because what's in us will eventually come out of us no matter what we do or how well we monitor our behavior. So learning how to monitor our hearts, learning how to monitor those hearts for emotions like guilt and anger and fear, well, that's critical to being healthy relationally and healthy spiritually. But in this episode, I want to go in a little bit of a different direction, and I want to talk about some of the harmful emotions that disguise themselves as virtues. They disguise themselves as care, as compassion, as concern, as love. But the truth is, they hurt the people around us. Because care doesn't always feel caring. Love doesn't always feel loving. Matter of fact, what love requires of us can sometimes feel like anything but love. Now, if you're a parent or you were raised by some good parents, you get this, you understand it. Sometimes the most caring or loving thing a parent can do for their child doesn't feel very caring or loving to the child in the moment, does it? But you do it because it's what's best for the kid, and you trust that eventually they're going to look back and go, oh, I'm so glad you did. Well, that dynamic, it actually doesn't change now that we're adults. Sometimes the most caring or loving thing we can do for another person may not feel very caring or loving to them at the time. And because of that, I think a lot of times we don't do it. We don't do it because we're afraid of rejection, because of the discomfort with conflict, because of apprehension around confrontation. Those are all emotions that, if we're not careful, they'll disguise themselves as virtues, as care, concern, and love. But you don't want the fear of rejection. You don't want being uncomfortable. You don't want being nervous to be the boss of you and what you do you? Well, of course not. So how do you overcome it? Well, before we talk about that, there's one other harmful emotion I probably should mention, and it's just indifference. This is when we just don't care enough, or maybe we don't care at all. In other words, I don't care what happens to you. I don't care what's best for you. But none of us want indifference to own us, do we? We don't want to own our indifference either. We're not willing a lot of times to be honest and go, hey, that's going to wreck their life, but I'm not going to say anything because I don't really care about them. So instead, we disguise those harmful emotions in phrases like, that's going to wreck their life, but I shouldn't interfere. It's none of my business. They didn't ask for my opinion. We pretend that we're being sensitive when we're really just acting scared. But when you're about to make a financial or relational or spiritual or professional decision that's going to be a train wreck for you, well, do you want your friend to be indifferent? Do you want them to stay silent? Or do you hope they'll speak up before you tear up your life? I mean, no matter how uncomfortable it is, you want them to step up and speak up, don't you? You hope they care enough to confront you with the truth if they know a train wreck is waiting on you. Well, that's what we should all do for each other. And if you're a Jesus follower, that's what our leader expects us to do for each other. I'll give you the context for this in just a second, but one time Jesus said to his followers, if your brother or sister, not a little brother or sister, but a friend, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, which may be enough reason not to follow Jesus right there. I mean, who wants to do that? Well, I'll tell you who. People who care do that. People who genuinely love you. People who want what's best for you. That's who. But this feels kind of harsh and judgmental. So what I want to do is I want to back up for just a minute. I want to explain to you the context around why Jesus would say this. See, this chapter starts with Jesus' disciples asking him who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. You can find this in Matthew 18. Now, when they ask about this, they are not referring to some place up there. They're referring to what Jesus came to establish down here. The kingdom of heaven is what the world would be like if the world were working right, if our world lived by Jesus' values. And these guys ask who's the greatest, hoping Jesus is going to point at them. But instead, he pulls this little child from the crowd. He sits him right in the middle of them. And he goes, well, the greatest is going to be whoever learns to trust me like this little child. In other words, the greatest is the humblest. The greatest is the servant. And then Jesus gives them a warning. He says, if anyone causes one of these little ones, and he's talking about people who believe in him, one of these little ones to stumble, it'd be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Now, Jesus is not being literal here. He's using hyperbole to make a point. He's going, don't be the person who does something that causes a person who follows Jesus to trip up, to fall, to get thrown off course, to step out of bounds. It's just not loving to them. Matter of fact, Jesus went on and he warned them. He said, woe to the world because of the things that cause people to stumble. Such things must come, but woe to the person through whom they come. In other words, this was just Jesus' way of saying, hey, there are things in life that trip people up. But don't be the person who throws something in their way and tries to make them stumble. Don't be someone's regret. Don't be their mistake. Don't ever trip somebody up in their marriage or with their reputation or with the progress they're making in their career. Don't be the reason someone loses their way and stops following Jesus. You never want somebody to say, oh, well, life was going really well until I met, and then say your name. Or my marriage, it was going great until he met or she met, and then say your name. I mean, don't ever be the person who causes another person to stumble. And then he turns and starts talking about when we get in our own way. Jesus says, okay, if your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, well, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. And he says, if your eye causes you to stumble, just gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. Now again, this is not literal. Jesus is using hyperbole to say, hey, if there is something in your life that trips you up, that throws you off course, you're way better off getting rid of it. Anything that has the potential to create regret in you or has potential to get control of you, you'd be better off avoiding it entirely, even if it's not technically wrong because it's not good for you. So you just gotta get rid of it. But we all have some stories where we have chosen chaos over throwing something away, don't we? I mean, looking back on our regret stories, don't you wish you could go back and maybe throw away that phone number, but you didn't, and it threw your life into chaos? You wish you could delete the text, but you responded. Eventually, you threw away a relationship. Some of you wish you'd thrown away that first drink, but you didn't, and it threw your life into addiction. And yeah, if you could go back, you'd throw that thing away in a minute. I mean, that'd be so much easier than the chaos that you ended up throwing your life into. This is why Jesus says, do whatever you have to do to make sure something doesn't cause you to stumble. And you throw your life into the garbage dump. And then I love what he does next. If you're wondering, well, what's Jesus going to do to me if I don't listen to him? If I do that, or I've already done that, and I've thrown my life into chaos, how's he going to react to me? Well, he tells you. He looked at him that day and he said, what do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, one of them stumbles off, gets lost, loses his way, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for that one that wandered off? And if he finds it, Jesus says, truly I tell you, that shepherd is happier about the one sheep than about the 99 that didn't wander off. And then I love this. Jesus looks him right in the eye and he says, in the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. Don't miss that. If you have stumbled, if you have wandered, if you've tripped up and fallen, if you've stepped out of bounds, if you've gotten off course, if you stopped following Jesus and you think your Heavenly Father is angry with you, you are wrong. Jesus says he's not angry. He's concerned. Yeah, he's chasing after you, but not to pay you back. He's chasing after you to bring you back. And when you come home, he's happier about you being home than all of us who never wandered off this time. That's how much he loves you. So let me summarize real quick. Jesus, you don't want us to do anything that would trip somebody else up in their life. Okay, I got that. Let's not be part of somebody's regret story. And you don't want us to play around with anything that might trip us up. I mean, we need to throw away anything that could throw our life into chaos. But if we do trip up, you still love us. You want us to come back to you. You're not mad at us. You're concerned about us, and you're going to come looking for us. Okay, this is awesome. Well, hang on. There's one final thing Jesus said. He goes, because all of this is true, if you follow me, then you need to join me and do what I do. You are now part of this process of looking for the lost sheep who wander off. To which maybe you're thinking, what do you mean by that, Jesus? Well, he tells us. This is when he looked at the crowd and said, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. To which maybe you're thinking, oh, Jesus, I don't point out anything. I'll go and pray. I mean, that's how I care. I just pray for them that they'll get their life straightened out. It's your job to point out their sin, Jesus. I'm going to pray for you to be able to do it. I care too much to say something. And Jesus would say, no, no, no. If you have a relationship with someone and you see them stumbling and wandering off, you don't actually care about them unless you say something. You need to go have a loving, honest conversation with them about what you see and where you're afraid they're headed. And I know you're thinking, well, that's none of my business. No, no, no. Jesus made it your business. If you're thinking, well, that doesn't feel very loving. No, it's actually the most loving thing you can do for them. And then Jesus tells us, if they listen to you when you go talk to them, you've won them over. You spared them so much heartache. You saved them from so much heartbreak. I mean, if they listen to you, you just gave them an extraordinary gift. You will forever be a positive part of their life story. To which I think, great, can we just stop there? And Jesus goes, nope, because actually when you go talk to them, that rarely works. So he says this, but if they will not listen to you, take one or two others along so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. What? Yeah. If they won't listen to you, Jesus says, grab a couple of their other close friends who are concerned about them, and y'all all go together and try to talk some sense into them. Because I'm not going to let indifference or the fear of rejection or my apprehension of confrontation or my discomfort with conflict keep me from doing what's best for them. To which maybe we ask, well, what if it doesn't go well though? Now I'm 0 for 2, Jesus. He says, yeah, but if they still refuse to listen, you're not done. Now I want you to tell it to the church. Let me just pause here, because that word church doesn't mean stand up on a stage and tell everybody at a church service. The church as we know it today, well, that didn't exist when Jesus said this. The word church there, when he said it, it literally meant their assembly or community of friends. So in our context, maybe it's a small group they're a part of, a volunteer team they're part of, where there's a group of people and they know these people care about them. Jesus says, you try to get everybody who loves them to come together, give it one more shot and help them. And then Jesus says, if they refuse to listen even to that group, to the church, then treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Now this does not mean you shun the person or you kick them out of church. No, no. When you confront somebody, listen, when you confront somebody, there's an assumption that you're making that they see the world like you do and they value what you do, which is why you think they'll realize they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But Jesus says, if you confront them 3 times, and all 3 times they refuse to listen, well, that is a sign that they actually don't share the same values you do. At that point, you should treat them differently. And by differently, I mean, you just back off. You don't keep pushing it. Now it's not your business because they are not trying to follow Jesus like you are. Now you shouldn't expect them to do what Jesus says any more than you would expect a non-believer to do what Jesus says. So now what's your responsibility? Now you love them and you wait for God to change them. So here's my guess. My guess is, as you've been watching this, somebody's come to mind, haven't they? And it is so frustrating. You already feel the fear, the discomfort, the apprehension, maybe the indifference rising up in you. But come on. You don't want those emotions to be the boss of you. You don't want those emotions to keep you from doing what you need to do. Because that friend you're thinking about, their future may depend on it. Their family may hang in the balance. Their faith may be at stake. So do not let silence get the best of you. Let's love one another like Jesus has loved us. Let's get involved in searching for that one lost sheep that stumbled and is wandering off. Let's do it with love. Let's do it with care and concern. Let's do it with kindness and with clarity. But let's do it. And let's do it this week, because that's what love requires us to do.